Morning, friends. I'm practicing getting up early, about 24 hours from now at 6:40 a.m. or sooner tomorrow. I will be connecting to another time zone and starting a new assignment, working with kids, working with kind of a coding with kids situation, learning coding together. I'll be learning more about them and they'll be learning more about me and coding. So I thought I'd better practice getting up pretty early. I've already been up now for a couple hours. And I've tossed a couple versions of this YouTube because I can't seem to get the lighting right so that you could see my book covers. And I was getting my head too close to the camera. I try to keep some standards here since I do teach online. I need to keep in practice, right? So you may wonder, why do I make all these YouTubes? Well, partly just it is kind of therapeutic for me to express myself regardless of view numbers, but also because I am an online teacher, it's kind of professional development, you could say. So I wanted to do two books, show and tell books, cover of um, this one, Cosmic Fishing. This one has the famous picture of Bucky and Applewhite on the back. Applewhite didn't often like to have his picture taken, but this one he's looking pretty dapper. This was 1974 at Waldorf Astoria. I I used to have dinner with Ed a few times. He came out and visited me, yes, but I saw him more often in his native Washington D.C., where he lived in Georgetown. He devoted his life outside of his career in the CIA. He worked with Bucky Fuller. He worked on the Dymaxion House in Wichita, Kansas. He talks about that, I believe, in this book. I should look at this book some more. It's been a while since I read it. The other one I want to introduce is A Love of Discovery by Robert Karplus. It's his writings as edited by Robert G. Fuller, Department of Physics and Astronomy, Director, Research and Physics Education Group, Reforming Physics Project. He was at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, and flew me out there once to help with what we called first person physics, which is, how when astronauts want to go be astronauts, they have to be subjected to a lot of physical forces, right? G forces, but also other things, zero gravity. There's a whole range of visceral experiences that you'll have to get used to if you want to be an astronaut. But in order to be an airplane pilot and many other things, as you learn the physics, if you also learn subjectively what acceleration means and so forth, that's going to help, right? With engines, when you can empathize with a big motor and understand torque sort of in your gut, that's closer to it than if you're just doing computer simulations, computer models, but you don't have any sort of inward sense of what's going on. And it's kind of in that vein that I want to switch topics to Max Blumenthal. I mentioned him in my most recent video. I talked about Project Renaissance. At the time when I wrote that Project Renaissance about public-private partnerships, I was in a nonprofit at the time that was getting government funding to work with refugees. So I go back a ways thinking about refugees, although my work at the time with CUE, Center for Urban Education, was not with the refugee management. It was a spin-off having to do with helping older workers, people younger than myself now, pick up some computer skills to stay in the workforce if that's what they were capable of doing and wanted to, needed to. So the government still had jobs training for them, and I don't know if that's even available anymore. So yeah, here's a blog post about my collaboration with Dr. Fuller over the years. It was, a long-running relationship, had several chapters in it, and one of the success stories was the Understanding Human Motion CD, which got handed out as part of a packet to everyone in the American Association of Physics Teachers that year at the conference. I got to be at one of those conferences that took place here in Portland. Um, Here's a picture of the home page that we created together. I was the webmaster for this. So I'm not like a degreed physics person. He didn't take me on because of my doctorate in physics, which I don't have. I was a webmaster. So going from that to Max Blumenthal, here I think it's the connection is how it feels that, people around the world are still in torturous situations. So many detention centers are not a new idea. And, I used to think growing up in Rome and looking at all these implements of torture and tiny little prison cells where they keep people in Castle San Angelo. As a kid, I grew up going through miles and miles of museums looking at implements of torture in war, and I said, gosh, I'm glad I'm born in the time when that's all behind us. But of course, it's not all behind us. It's still a very cruel world. I mean, we sort of make fun of that in cartoons when people say goodbye, cruel world, but we understand what they mean, right? The world is cruel, and the drive to make it better is visceral. And I think this Max Blumenthal, the journalist, he senses the pain. He has empathy, and that's why he's driven right around the world now. I've seen him back to back yesterday in both Central America and the Middle East, and his concerns are real. Whether you agree with him or not, the point is, in a way, I'd say he's doing first person physics. He's feeling at a visceral level the human enterprise and what it's like. And I'm hoping in bringing up these memes, my connections with journalism, that one's pretty vicarious, but I did go to the Middle East and see refugee camps for myself long before I worked for Q. I was just a teenager. My parents were the AFSC work camp leaders that year. I've talked about this a little bit in other YouTubes. We went and built a swimming pool in Ramallah and with Palestinians, and then we went over to Bethlehem area and lived on a kibbutz for a little while, where we were visited by members of the Knesset and so forth. And the time was more hopeful back then. This was the early 70s, right? Bobby Fischer versus Boris Spassky was going on. Even the Cold War was starting to wind down, it seemed. And I think, looking back, I think Bucky Fuller was a big part of America's confidence, because World's Fairs and so on, there was a positive futurism, a hope that was represented by the Americans. The Russians were very taken with his dome in Afghanistan. They saw it as the breakthrough that it was. And I'm talking about rolling back to that time and moving forward, right? Figuring out a way. And there's connections through the physics world, through journalism, and then I'd say through schools of religion. I think of Max as a religious guy. Bucky Fuller, kind of railed against what he called organized religion. He didn't necessarily subscribe to any one particular religion, but he was a religious guy, and he was, I think, dismayed by all the religious wars that go on, right? Because when religions organize, it's often to counter or attack some other religion, and so that's a source of great suffering. But in another sense, he was a very religious man, and I think that I shouldn't forget that schools of religion and religions in general have a role to play in this so-called Project Renaissance initiative, where we team up our R&D, our highest tech, with our wish to help people, to help ourselves. I mean, really, our living standards are all kept lower by the fact of torturous conditions around the world, especially unnecessary, right? It's not the Malthusian world a lot of us think it is necessarily. People are worried now on Medium about population going down too low, and it's been about too much. Now it's too little, and so on. It's like, I think we do have a window here still, an opportunity to make things better, and I'm putting myself out there in the different ways that I have played roles in the past and in the future as a teacher of adults and kids, a collaborator with the physics community, and also someone who's very empathetic with the journalists who are out there wanting to make a difference, looking for ways to make a difference. And what I'm suggesting is more convergence to a specific agenda that would involve reforms to the curriculum, which is what Robert Fuller was into, reforming the physics curriculum. So I don't have any big sweeping reforms because I'm just one guy. I'm the AA battery, but I do want to see the ball rolling, right? I want to see what we can do to make this world a better place so that it's not that we only hope for the afterlife is our only hope, right? It's like to pray for the next life is kind of to see that there's no hope for this world. And I understand that this has been a pretty cruel planet for a long time, and religion has often been our way to deal with that. But making the world a better place is what I'm saying is focusing on terraforming Earth and making this a more livable planet is not against God. It's not against the will of God to focus on a positive future. So I'm challenging schools of religion to jump in here and get with it in terms of the Bucky curriculum as well, the whole number of volumes and so on. Let's find space for that and start making connections for people. All right, that was practice. I'm going to be getting up early tomorrow, and I got to remember not to get too close to the camera and so forth. Talk to you soon.